When the cameras never stopped, Hollywood's realest moments. What if I told you some of the most famous scenes in movie history weren't performances at all? Not a single second of acting. A director lied to his own leading lady to get a real reaction of horror. A married couple destroyed each other on camera using real anger from their real marriage. A grieving woman cried tears that had nothing to do with the script. For decades, audiences believed they were watching brilliant craft, actors so skilled they could fake anything. They were wrong. Marlon Brando and Maria Schneider, the director who deceived his own star. Let's start with the darkest example, because it sets the tone for everything else on this list. In 1972, Last Tango in Paris was being filmed in Paris, and its most notorious scene, the so-called butter scene between Marlon Brando and Maria Schneider, was built entirely on a lie. Schneider, just 19 years old at the time, later said she had not been told the full details of what the scene would involve before cameras rolled. Brando and director Bernardo Bertolucci had privately agreed to withhold specifics, believing that catching her off guard would produce a rawer, more authentic reaction than any rehearsal could. It worked, in the sense that what ended up on film was not performance. It was real shock, real distress, and real confusion on a young actress's face, immortalized forever in one of the most controversial films ever released. Schneider spent years afterward describing how humiliated and betrayed she felt, and how the industry's silence around the decision only deepened the damage. When the truth finally became public, it forced a long overdue reckoning about what directors are allowed to take from performers in the name of art. It's a brutal reminder that authenticity on screen sometimes came at a devastating personal cost. And Schneider is far from the only actress whose off-screen pain became the industry's most celebrated footage. In fact, one of Hollywood's most beloved final performances was recorded under conditions almost as heartbreaking, and it happened to one of the most photographed women who ever lived, Marilyn Monroe, the star who was falling apart in real time. Marilyn Monroe's final completed film, The Misfits, 1961, is remembered as a tragic mirror of her real life. And for good reason. During production, Monroe was battling severe insomnia, deepening depression, and the collapse of her marriage to Arthur Miller, who had written the screenplay specifically for her. So when her character breaks down crying in several key scenes, those weren't tears summoned through technique. They came from a woman genuinely unraveling in front of the crew. Her co-star Clark Gable and other members of the production reportedly found it uncomfortable to watch. Less like observing a performance, and more like witnessing someone's private collapse happening in public. Monroe channeled her exhaustion, loneliness, and heartbreak directly into the role, and the result is often cited as one of her most emotionally raw performances ever captured on film. Less than a year later, she was gone, making these scenes feel even more haunting in retrospect. Monroe isn't the only legend whose real-life mental and emotional state bled directly into a role she couldn't escape from. One actress, playing a character sliding into madness, was reportedly living out a nearly identical breakdown in her own life at the very same time, and her co-star later admitted he felt guilty just watching her. Vivien Leigh and Marlon Brando. Vivien Leigh's performance as Blanche DuBois in A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951, is widely regarded as one of the greatest in film history, but the tragedy behind it runs deeper than most viewers realize. Leigh was privately struggling with serious mental and emotional health issues during filming, and Blanche's slow descent into fragility and instability paralleled Leigh's own state disturbingly closely. Director Elia Kazan and co-star Marlon Brando reportedly both noticed that Leigh's trembling hands and tearful, unstable moments on camera weren't a technique. They were simply Leigh, unfiltered. In the film's devastating breakdown scene, her cries are said to have come from genuine exhaustion and despair rather than rehearsed emotion. Brando later admitted he felt uneasy watching her come apart, sensing he was witnessing something far more real than a performance. After filming wrapped, Leigh reportedly struggled with depression for months. It's a haunting pattern, actress after actress pouring real suffering into iconic roles. But not every unscripted moment on this list came from pain. Some came from directors who simply wanted to manufacture genuine human reactions, whether the actor consented to that or not. like the horror icon who wasn't warned before the most famous scream in cinema history. Janet Leigh and Alfred Hitchcock. Janet Leigh's shower scene in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, 1960, remains one of the most iconic moments in horror. What most people don't know is that Hitchcock deliberately kept Leigh in the dark about exactly when the attack would happen and how intense it would feel in the moment. So when the killer struck, her panic, trembling, and terror weren't performed, they were her genuine, unrehearsed reaction to being caught off guard. Leigh later admitted the experience left such a lasting impression that she avoided taking showers for months afterward. Combine that with the freezing water, harsh lighting, and now legendary shrieking score, and it's easy to understand why the scene still feels so viscerally real more than 60 years later. Hitchcock's willingness to manipulate his own actress for the sake of a genuine reaction gave horror cinema one of its most enduring, authentic images of fear. Deception behind the camera is one thing, but what happens when two actors bring real off-screen romantic chemistry directly onto the set, with the director actively encouraging it? That's exactly what happened during one of the most passionate beach scenes ever filmed. Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr, when the director said, "Just let the waves guide you." The legendary beach kiss between Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr in From Here to Eternity, 1953, wasn't tightly choreographed the way most love scenes were at the time. Director Fred Zinnemann reportedly skipped detailed rehearsal and simply told the two stars to let the ocean and the moment carry them. What followed became one of the most iconic romantic images in film history, the tide crashing over two entwined bodies on the sand. Lancaster and Kerr's chemistry in that unscripted moment was spontaneous and unmistakably real. Kerr reportedly admitted afterward that Lancaster's intensity left her genuinely breathless, while Lancaster called it one of the most honest moments of his career. That looseness, the willingness to let two real people react to each other rather than hit predetermined marks, is exactly why the scene still feels alive today instead of staged. Sometimes the spark wasn't planned by a director at all. It came from two co-stars who were already falling for each other in real life, long before the cameras started rolling. Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor, co-stars who fell for each other on and off screen. In A Place in the Sun, 1951, the on-screen tenderness between Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor wasn't purely fictional. Clift was reportedly captivated by Taylor during filming, even while privately wrestling with his own personal struggles, and their scenes together, especially the famous lake scene, carried a warmth that felt far more genuine than typical screen chemistry. Taylor later described Clift as one of the closest bonds of her life, and that real affection is often credited with making their romantic scenes together feel so quietly devastating. Taylor, it turns out, had a habit of bringing real emotion to the screen. Just 15 years later, she'd do it again, this time using the raw fuel of her own marriage to deliver one of the most brutally honest performances of her career. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, A Real Marriage, weaponized for the screen. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton were already one of Hollywood's most famously volatile real-life couples, full of passion, jealousy, and explosive fights, before they ever stepped onto the set of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? 1966. Director Mike Nichols reportedly encouraged both actors to draw directly from their real relationship rather than suppress it, and the result is often described as one of the most emotionally unfiltered performances ever captured on film. When Taylor's character screamed or lashed out, it's said to have carried the weight of Taylor's own personal anger and heartbreak, not just a scripted argument. Burton's reactions were reportedly just as unrehearsed, real responses to real fury from his own wife. Taylor won an Oscar for the role, and critics have long called it less a performance than raw emotional truth caught on camera. If real married couples could turn genuine conflict into award-winning cinema, imagine what happened when a director deliberately manipulated an actress's uncertainty for the sake of one perfect, devastating goodbye. Ingrid Bergman, the actress who didn't know the ending. Ingrid Bergman's performance in the final scene of Casablanca, 1942, is often called the greatest goodbye in film history, and part of what makes it so powerful is that Bergman genuinely didn't know until the very end which man her character would ultimately choose. Director Michael Curtiz reportedly kept her deliberately uncertain so that her confusion and heartbreak in the final airport scene would read as completely real rather than performed. That uncertainty is exactly what audiences see when Bridgman's character says goodbye through tears, a believable mixture of loss, surprise, and quiet admiration that no script alone could manufacture. It's part of why the scene has remained iconic for more than 80 years. Audiences could sense, even subconsciously, that they weren't watching an actress hit her marks. They were watching genuine uncertainty play out in real time. Uncertainty and manipulation weren't only used to produce heartbreak. Sometimes directors used them to manufacture genuine fear and tension in male leads too, pushing them right up to their breaking point before the cameras even rolled. Al Pacino, the actor who was kept in character for hours. Although The Godfather, 1972, technically arrived after Hollywood's golden age, it carried the same commitment to raw realism. In the infamous restaurant assassination scene, Al Pacino's trembling hands and visible sweat weren't a performance choice. Reportedly, they were completely genuine. Director Francis Ford Coppola is said to have kept Pacino in character for hours before filming to build unbearable psychological pressure, using the heat of the lights, prolonged silence, and mounting tension to push him into a real state of anxiety. By the time Pacino's character pulled the trigger, his racing heartbeat and shaking hands were reportedly pure adrenaline, not acting technique. Pacino later said he didn't perform the fear in that scene, he actually felt it. That authenticity is a major reason the scene remains one of the most tense and iconic moments in film history. Manufactured pressure is one way to get a real reaction, but sometimes the pressure wasn't manufactured at all. Sometimes an actor's own painful childhood simply came pouring out on camera, whether the director asked for it or not. James Dean, the actor who relived his own childhood on camera. James Dean's legendary performance in Rebel Without a Cause, 1955, is often described less as acting and more as a direct channel to his real emotional wounds. Dean grew up with a distant father and reportedly carried deep pain from a difficult childhood, pain that surfaced directly in his most famous outbursts on screen, including the iconic "You're tearing me apart" scene. Director Nicholas Ray later revealed that Dean frequently improvised, pulling from his own memories rather than sticking strictly to the script, which gave his portrayal of Jim Stark an unsettling, lived-in intensity. Co-stars reportedly said watching him could feel uncomfortably intimate, like witnessing someone's real emotional wounds reopen in real time rather than watching a technical performance. That rawness is part of why Dean's brief career still resonates as one of the most emotionally honest in Hollywood history. Some actors channeled personal pain. Others were simply pushed there deliberately by directors who valued a real reaction more than an actor's comfort, including one actress who reportedly burst into real tears on a set run by one of cinema's most demanding perfectionists. Shelley Winters, pushed past the breaking point. Shelley Winters' role as the desperate, delusional Charlotte Hayes in Lolita, 1962, required some of the most emotionally exhausting scenes of her career: humiliation, rejection, rage. Director Stanley Kubrick was famous for his demanding, perfectionist approach, and he reportedly pushed actors hard to extract genuinely authentic reactions rather than settling for rehearsed ones. During one particularly intense argument scene, Winters reportedly broke down in real tears, feeling genuinely humiliated and worn down after repeated takes. Her trembling voice and visible strain weren't rehearsed choices. They were the product of real emotional exhaustion on set. That unsettling realism is part of what gives the film its lingering discomfort. Winters later admitted the role took a real psychological toll on her, a stark example of how far directors of that era were willing to push performers in pursuit of the truth. And finally, we end back where authenticity first started blurring the line between chemistry and consent, with a legendary on-screen kiss that left one of the industry's biggest stars genuinely shaken. Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh, the kiss that left her dizzy. The chemistry between Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind, 1939, has been celebrated for over 80 years, but not everything about it was pure movie magic. During their famous kiss as Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara, Gable's forceful, passionate embrace reportedly caught Leigh genuinely off guard, leaving her visibly dizzy and shaken in a way that wasn't scripted. The camera captured real surprise and tension on Lee's face, emotions that happened to align perfectly with her character's own turmoil in that moment. Behind the scenes, Lee reportedly found Gable charming but overwhelming, and that authentic push and pull between the two stars is exactly what translated so powerfully onto film. Few audiences realized at the time that Lee's reactions weren't rehearsed at all. They were real, caught forever in one of cinema's most iconic scenes. From manufactured fear to real heartbreak to genuine chemistry no script could fake, these 12 moments are proof that some of Hollywood's greatest performances were never performances at all. If this changed the way you'll watch these classics, you already know which one you're rewatching tonight.